Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Drishti IAS, and myself, I'm Girish Venkatesh, and you're joining me live for the online course on Drishti Learning app. And this is an online course which started last week, and that is 1st of July. We started this course, and this is for UGC-NET GRF Paper 2 Political Science. So, yesterday we did complete realism, the entire topic with regard to realism, and I did start with liberalism, or you can say that's idealism. आज हम लोग idealism and that is liberalism will go ahead with the discussion. But before that, as we go into the topic, we should wrap up with certain things. We should discuss certain aspects which we had discussed in the last class so that we can go ahead with today's discussion. See, in last class when we talked about liberalism, then I did say you that liberalism, it's also referred as idealism. And liberalism, it's an approach which is based on the belief that international cooperation and international institutions, they can reduce conflict and they can promote peace among the nation states. That means the idealist thinkers or the idealist approach is of the belief that it is international cooperation and it is international institutions which can avoid war. And if war is being avoided, then peace can be promoted among the nation states. As I said you, realists, they believed state playing the primary role, or state is the primary actor. And realists, they did say that non-state actors also exist, but the non-state actors, they have limited resources, they have limited powers and all. But here in liberalism, it's contrary to that of idealism. It's contrary to that of realism. And here, the idealist thinker, they talk about the non-state actors playing a very important role. That means they do not believe in the state-centric approach. And the non-state actors like NGOs, international organizations, MNCs, multinational organizations and all, they play a very important role. That is what the realist thinkers, they believed. Plus, the realist thinker talk about individual freedom. They talk about democracy. They talk about justice. They talk about trade and commerce. And also they talk about the rule of law. And they say that all these elements, that is individual freedom, justice, democracy, trade and commerce, and rule of law, they all are key in promoting peace and stability in the international system. Thereby, these elements, they encourage what? They encourage international cooperation. Then we went into the assumptions to idealism, and this was very, very important. Because कोई भी अप्रोच करना है तो उसके assumptions पे चलना बहुत जरूरी होता है. एंड जब हमने इतना अच्छा इंट्रोडक्शन किया तो assumptions was obvious that it would be very easy and very clear to us. The first assumption is with regard to human beings. The idealist thinkers, the idealist approach, they believe that human beings, they are essentially good. What I'm saying, they are essentially good. And It is democracy which allows the unrestricted expression of this goodness. That means human beings, they are essentially good. And because there is democracy, then democracy, what it does, it allows the unrestricted expression of this goodness. And due to this unrestricted expression of this goodness, human beings, they prefer for what? Peace. So the first very assumption of idealist approach is nothing else but human beings, they are essentially good. But what about the realist? They said that human beings, they are egoistic, they are impractical, they are egoistic, they are selfish, they are uncooperative, and so on. So they gave a negative view with regard to human beings. But the liberals or the idealists, they have a positive view with regard to the human nature. The second one is with regard to the cause of war. The idealists believe that the cause of war is not within the anarchy. It's not within anarchy. Rather, it's within the lack of democracy, lack of morality, and in the absence of international organization and institutions. That means, according to the idealist, war is not an outcome of anarchy. Rather, it's an outcome due to the lack of democracy, morality, absence of international organizations, and international law. As a result, the idealists, they believe that these are the byproducts. That means they consider all these as the byproducts of international anarchy. Okay? They considered it as the byproducts of international anarchy, and they also say that these byproducts, they are changeable. That means we can see changes. That is dynamic. Third one was with regard to war. As the realists said, war is inevitable. But the idealists say that the war and conflicts, they are temporary. Okay? They are temporary in nature. They are transitional in nature. So they are not inevitable. They can be avoided. Fourth, what is the main focus of idealism? The main focus of idealism is to seek peace, justice, and independence. Peace, justice, and interdependence. Sorry, it's interdependence. Main focus of idealism, here I have written it, main focus of idealism is securing peace, democracy, justice, and interdependence. And interdependence between what? Interdependence between the institutions of democracy and law and order. And idealism also focuses on human nature rather than unitary state as a prime actor within the international politics. So this is what is the assumption which we did in the last class. Then after that, we talked about the major conceptual implications of idealist thought to international relations. The conceptual implication. Now, what is that conceptual implication? First, idealist thought, the conceptual implication which idealist thought have to the international relations is, number one, democratic form of government. Number two, peaceful resolution of conflicts. Okay. Number three, individual freedom and human rights. Independence of judiciary. Ensuring peace and cooperation among states. Remove aristocratic privileges. Freedom of trade, free market under capitalism. Equality before law. And the last one, limited government. तो ये सारी चीजें लास्ट क्लास में हम लोगों ने करा था. Now today, as I said you, we'll talk about some of the thinkers who did contribute towards liberalism or classical liberalism, or we can find, you can say, they did teach about liberalism or classical liberalism. So here we can call it as first one, we can name him as Immanuel Kant. Then we'll talk about John Locke. ठीक है, ये सब के बाद हम लोग जॉन स्टुअर्ट मिल भी हम लोग बात करेंगे. So here I can give the name as precursors to liberalism or classical liberalism. Precursors to liberalism, or you can call it as classical liberalism. The first one, as I said you, it's Immanuel Kant. Now, Immanuel Kant, we should all remember that one of his famous work was Perpetual Peace, a philosophical sketch. This is one of his famous work. Perpetual Peace, a philosophical sketch. Now, this work, Perpetual Peace, a philosophical sketch, it is regarded as the origin of his democratic peace theory. That means in Immanuel Kant, he talks about democratic peace theory in this particular work, that is prospective peace. Now, Kant also talks about that the individuals, they desire to be free and prosperous. Matlab, every individual, they desire what? They desire to be free and they desire to be prosperous. And according to Immanuel Kant, this is only possible, ठीक है, if there is democracy and there is free trade. That means every individual, what is their desire? Their desire is, matlab, every individual, they want to be free as well as prosperous. And to be free and prosperous, democracy and free trade needs to be expanded. And if democracy and free trade will expand, Immanuel Kant says that it will result to the growth of international law. As democracy, as trade and commerce, it will expand, then this will result to the development or to the growth of international law and also to the growth of international organization. And all this, according to Kant, will facilitate peace and it will bring peace in the world. So first, we should talk about Immanuel Kant and some of his thoughts with regard to international relations. Or when we talk about Immanuel Kant, then we can see that in his writings, in his work, he does talk about international relations and he does talk about peace which has to be established. So here in Immanuel Kant mein aap log likh lo, please write it down. His work Perpetual Peace, I should write it here. क्या है कि ऊपर में जगह नहीं है. Is regarded, write it down please, is regarded as the origin of democratic peace theory. Is regarded as the origin of democratic peace theory. Kant said that individual desire to be free and prosperous, मतलब individuals desire to be free and prosperous, and also democracy and trade will expand. And also democracy and trade is likely to expand. This expansion would naturally lead to the development of international law and organization. मतलब यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं, Kant says that individuals, they desire to be free and prosperous, and also democracy and trade, it's likely to expand. And with the expansion of democracy and trade, there will be the development of what? International law and organization. This would facilitate interactions and okay. So the first thing which we are talking about is his work. What is the name? Perpetual Peace, a philosophical sketch. Now this perpetual piece of philosophical sketch is regarded as the origin of his democratic peace theory. And in this democratic peace theory, he says that individuals, they desire to be free and prosperous, and democracy and trade, it's likely to expand, and this expansion would lead to the development of what? international law and organization, and this would facilitate interaction and promote peace among nation states. ठीक है, और सेकेंड बात उन्होंने ये भी कहा, he also said this one, Kant said that war and conflict can be averted or mitigated war and conflict, it can be averted or it can be mitigated through changes both in the domestic, through changes both in the domestic and international structure of governance. Now this is one of the work, मतलब Immanuel Kant के बारे में, just like realism में we talked about Thucydides, we talked about you can say Cautelia, Hobbes and all. तो यहाँ पे हम लोग सबसे पहले Immanuel Kant के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, and Immanuel Kant, we can see that whatever he said in that, he's talking about democratic peace theory. Then he talks about individuals' desire, and individuals' desire is what? To become free as well as prosperous. And he also talks about the expansion of democracy and trade. And with the expansion of democracy and trade, naturally there will be the development of international organization and international laws. And when there is the development of international organization and law, then this international organization and law will lead to the interaction among the nations, and as a result there can be peace. Second point, he talks about wars and conflicts, and Kant believes that the wars and conflicts, they can be overcome, they can be mitigated, they can be averted. And how can we do it? He said that changes have to be brought both within the domestic as well as international structure of governance. Matlab, when changes will be brought with regard to international structure of governance and also with regard to the domestic structure of governance, then Kant believes that wars and conflicts, they can be averted. Okay, please write it down. Then we'll talk about Jeremy Bentham. Now, when we are talking about Jeremy Bentham, we all know that he came up with the word international law. So the word international law was given by Jeremy Bentham. And what is this international law? International law, according to him, was nothing else but it is the collection of rules which are governing relations between states and other entities. So international law are the rules which govern the relationship between the states and other entities, and these international laws, they are legally recognized, ठीक है, as international actors. मतलब यही है. तो सबने ये लिख लिया. चल, सेकेंड, its write it down, Jeremy Bentham. He came up with the term national law, okay, and national law is the set of rules. Please write it down, everyone. Is the set of rules, or you can also call it as the collection of rules. Collection of rules governing relations between the states and other entities that are legally recognized as international actors. They are legally recognized as international actors. He also was of the view that constitutional states would benefit by adhering the international law in their foreign policy. By adhering to. So this is a brief okay. So now we are talking about Jeremy Bentham. Now here the term international law comes. He came up with the term international law. Then he tries to define this international law, and he says it's the collection of rules which are governing relations between the states and other entities. And who are these other entities? They are those entities which are legally recognized as international actors. ठीक है, मतलब इंटरनेशनल लॉ जो होता है ये कलेक्शन ऑफ रूल्स है विच इज गवर्निंग द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन स्टेट्स, ठीक है, एंड ऑल्सो अदर entities who are legally recognized as international actors. Plus he says that the constitutional states, they would benefit by adhering means by following to international law in their foreign policy. That means every constitutional state, according to Bentham, they should follow the international law in their foreign policies, and thereby they can benefit from it. So this is what is all about Bentham's contribution to liberalism. That means Bentham also talks about international law. Just like in the previous section, we saw that Immanuel Kant is talking about democratic peace theory. He's talking about individuals' desire free, which is free and prosperous. He's talking about the expansion of democracy and trade, and thereby he talks about the growth and the development of international law and international organizations. ठीक है, तो ये सारा चीज के बारे में वहां पे बात हो रहा है. एंड ऑल्सो यहां पे जर्मी बेंथम के बारे में भी ये बात है. And last one we can talk about is John Locke. Please write it down and then I'll talk about John Locke. John Locke, we all know that he talks about the doctrine of natural rights of individuals, or this natural right of individuals he has referred to as properties. इसको उन्होंने property बोला है. Natural rights of individuals क्या है? Right to life, liberty and properties. So he has termed this as properties in his book, The Two Treatises of Government. And he has often, what we can say, he has often been regarded as the founding father of liberal theory. तो इसीलिए जॉन लॉकी भी कहीं ना कहीं he is towards, you can say, liberalism or liberalist approach to international relations. So in his work, we can find liberalist approach to international relations because he does talk about democratic government and their ability in securing peace. ठीक है, ये चीज उसने बात किया हुआ है. तो here we can say John Locke. He came up with the doctrine of natural rights of individuals and referred to it as properties in his book, The Two You can write it down, his book, The Two Treatises of Government. और ये जो Two Treatises of Government book है, इसमें John Locke, he has come up with the doctrine of natural rights of individual. और ये जो doctrine है natural rights of individual, this he has termed as properties. और ये जो natural rights of individuals है, he has called it as right to life, liberty and property. और लॉकी ने बोला they are inalienable rights, and he is regarded as the founding father of liberal theory. Founding father of liberal theory. He always believed that democratic government has the ability to secure peace, has the ability to secure peace. This analysis of Locke has been extended. Write it down. This analysis of Locke, it has been extended to the sphere of international relations by liberal theorists. Okay? So Locke also talks about the individual freedom. Okay? Locke is talking about individual freedom, natural rights of individual. और इसको उसने क्या नाम दिया है? Properties, in his book The Two Treatises of Government. And he is the founding father of liberal theory. Plus, he believed that democratic government, it has the ability to secure peace, and this analysis, it has been extended in the sphere of international relations. That means the liberal theorists, they have used the analysis of Locke with regard to democratic institutions. देखो, अगर हम कांत देखें या लॉकी देखें या बेंथम देखें, everywhere we can see that whatever assumptions, whatever introduction we did with regard to liberalism या idealist approach of international relation, we can see that they too talk about the same things. So yes, we can say that it's not a new thing. The liberal approach to international relations, that is about individual freedom, that is about democratic government, that is about international law, that is about international organizations, that is about peace, that is about how war can be overcome. It all was there with regard to the works. When we analyze the works of Kant, Locke and Bentham, we find these principles or these philosophies out there also. ठीक है? Clear है? So it's not a new thing with regard to the 20th century, but yes, philosophers like Locke, philosophers like Kant and Bentham, they have mentioned about it. Clear hai? Now, next topic which we have to do, types of liberalism पे चलेंगे. Next, very important, is the different strains of liberalism or idealism. And when I talk about strains, तो बहुत simply मैं इसको बोल देता हूं, you can call it as the phases. ठीक है? It's the different strains ठीक है? So the different strains of liberalism and idealism. सबसे पहले we'll talk about the first strain. I need all of you to copy it down because this is a very important thing. I have made things very easy by discussing such type of things. अब देखो फर्स्ट ट्रेन में I should tell you कि here the focus, when I say the strain of idealism, then the focus is on the analysis as well as understanding of human nature. That means in the first strain of idealism, the focus is on what? The focus is on analyzing as well as understanding human nature. दो चीज है, ह्यूमन नेचर को एनालाइज भी करना है, ह्यूमन नेचर को अंडरस्टैंड भी करना है. Now, this first strain, we can say that the main proponent of this line of idealist thought was Richard Cobden. Richard Cobden जो है, he is considered as the proponent to this line of thought. And Richard Cobden, he was of the belief that the role of the state, मतलब he believed that the role of the state in the spread of peace and freedom in the world was minimal. मतलब according to Cobden, whatever is the role of the state with regard to peace as well as with regard to freedom, that role is what? Minimal. मतलब Cobden talks about the minimal role of the state for promoting peace and freedom. Cobden also tries to give answer to the objective general laws which were based on human nature. है ना, रियलिस्ट लोगों ने बोला क्या था कि जो ऑब्जेक्टिव जनरल लॉज है, दे आर बेस्ड ऑन व्हाट? ह्यूमन नेचर. तो कॉब्डेन ट्राइज टू आंसर इन, मतलब ही ट्राइज टू गिव एन आंसर to the objective general laws which are there in human nature. Plus, he also talks about free trade. And he says that that free trade will ultimately lead to what? World peace. So, he talks about, he advocates about free trade. And we all should say that Cobden, in his views, in his thoughts, he was influenced by Adam Smith, David Ricardo and his ideas. So, first strain में हम बोल सकते हैं कि in this strain of idealism, the main focus was to analyze and understand the human nature. ठीक है, जो मेन फोकस है वो एनालिसिस एंड अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ ह्यूमन नेचर है. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट, मेन ऑफ दिस लाइन ऑफ थॉट was the main proponent of this line of thought was Richard Cobden. Richard कॉब्डेन, और इसका टाइम पीरियड हम बता सकते हैं 1804 से 1865. Main proponent of this line of thought was Richard Cobden. He believed that the role of state to secure peace, the role of state to secure, या हम बोल सकते हैं the role of state in the spread of peace and freedom. Peace and freedom was minimal. Minimal का मतलब रोल ऑफ स्टेट बहुत कम था. Peace and freedom, spread of peace and freedom was minimal in the world. ठीक है. And he believed please write it down. This is the first strain. In first strain, we are talking about Richard Cobden. Richard Cobden talks about the minimum role of the state with regard to the spread of peace and freedom. And he talks about free trade, which should be there among the states. And this free trade, according to him, will ultimately lead to what? World peace. Because free trade से क्या होगा? Interactions होगा. Interactions होगा तो cooperation होगा. And all this will lead to what? World peace. And he was strongly influenced by the ideas of, by the thoughts of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. ठीक है. So please write it down. ये first strain में main focus is analysis and understanding, and it was to analyze and understand the human nature. And here the main proponent is Richard Cobden, 1804 to 1865. Now he believed that the role of state in the spread of peace and freedom is minimal. ठीक है. And he advocated about what? Free trade, which would ultimately lead to what? World peace, strongly influenced by Adam Smith and David Ricardo. ठीक है. This is the first strain. You can write it down. Now then comes the second strain. Now in the first strain, the focus is on what? The focus is on the analysis and the understanding of human nature. Now in the second strain, the focus has shifted now to the analysis of the state. अब यहां पे सेकेंड स्ट्रेन में फोकस जो है इट्स ऑन द एनालिसिस ऑफ द स्टेट, और यहां पे जो मेन प्रोपोनेंट है, यू ऑल वुड नो द नेम, इट्स Woodrow Wilson, or you can call him as Woodrow Wilson, and he gave the theories of liberal internationalism. वो जो 14 principles Woodrow Wilson का है वो बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, ये पहले लिख लो आप लोग, फर्स्ट स्ट्रेन. And Woodrow Wilson, we all know, he advocated about self-determination of people, and he also talks about the spread of democracy. Then he also talks about the spread of global capitalism, collective security regimes, ठीक है, multilateral treaties with regard to international relations and all. चलो, let's go with the second strain. चलो, ठीक है. Second strain. Write it down. The focus shifted to the analysis मतलब स्टेट को एनालाइज कर रहा है, दैट इज वेयर द फोकस हैज शिफ्टेड. ठीक है, द फोकस शिफ्टेड टू द एनालिसिस ऑफ द स्टेट. ये हो गया मेन it's Woodrow Wilson. (1856 to 1924). ठीक है, so main who is there in this? The theory of liberal internationalism. ठीक है, then so Woodrow Wilson, he is emphasizing on self-determination of the people and also with regard to the spread of democracy in the world. Spread of democracy in the world. Wilson's idealism focused on the spread of His idealism focused on the spread of global capitalism. Write it down. Global capitalism, collective security regimes, collective security regimes, multilateralism in this is multilateralism. Remember it, this is multilateralism. Multilateralism in international deliberations, comma, open diplomacy in international negotiations. Open diplomacy in international negotiations. ठीक है, as well as freedom of navigation and freedom of seas. देखो सिंपल सा बात है, जो सेकेंड स्ट्रेन है, here the focus has shifted and what it is analysis of the state. First में क्या था, analysis and understanding of human nature. Now here there is an analysis on the state. Main proponent was Woodrow Wilson, 1856 to 1924. Now Woodrow Wilson came up with a theory that was liberal internationalism, and Wilson, he also talks about what? Self-determination of the people and the spread of democracy. Self-determination of the people and also the spread of democracy. अब Wilson's idealism जो है, Wilson's idealism, it is focusing on what? Spread of global capitalism, मतलब global capitalism का spread हो, collective security regimes, multilateralism in international deliberations, plus open diplomacy he is talking about, and freedom of navigation and freedom of seas. ठीक है, write it down and then we'll move into the now, when we are talking about Woodrow Wilson, we have to come up with his 14 policies. Now, the 14 policies which Woodrow Wilson declared so as to end the World War I in 1911. Okay, and he was the US president at that time. So, let's write the 14 principles also. ये आप लोगों ने लिख लिया. So, in liberalism, when we talk about those different strains, the first strain, it's dominated by focusing on analysis and understanding the human nature. Now, this was a phase whose main proponent was Richard Cobden, and he talks about the role of state, which is minimal when it comes to the spread of peace and freedom. And then he also advocated free trade, and this free trade, he says, it will ultimately lead to what? world peace. And he was strongly influenced by the ideas of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Then we come up with the second strain. Now in the second strain, the focus is on what? The focus is on the analysis of the state. Now here the main proponent is who? Woodrow Wilson. Now Woodrow Wilson, we all know, he is famous for his 14 principles, and this 14 principles he came up to negotiate the end of the World War I in 1980, and that too as a US president. So that 14 principles we'll be talking about, but yes, Woodrow Wilson talks about the self-determination of people as well as the spread of democracy. He also came up with the theory of liberal internationalism. And in that liberal internationalism, he's focusing about the very, you can say, spread of global capitalism. He talks about collective security regimes. He talks about multilateralism in international deliberations. Multilateralism, not one state or two states, the multilateralism with regard to international deliberations. Then he's talking about, because trade at that time played a very important role, so he talks about freedom of navigation, freedom of seas, and he also talks about open diplomacy with regard to international negotiations. So these were his main, Wilson's idealism. It focused on these things. So after that, we can talk about the 14 principles advocated So you can write it down, the 14 principles. I know we all know that 14 principles. First one, he talks about open convents. Now what is this convents? Convents is agreement. Open convents of peace. Open convents of peace openly arrived at with no secret agreements. He talks about open agreements, open convents, because he's talking about open diplomacy for international negotiations. So his idealism is all about open diplomacy. So when he talks about open diplomacy, then he, in his 14 principle, the first principle talks about open convents, that is agreement of peace, openly arrived at with no secret agreements. These agreements, it should be openly arrived at, comma, with no secret agreements. Second, freedom of the seas outside outside territorial waters. देखो ये जो मैंने अभी आपको बताया विल्सन्स आइडियलिज्म, इसमें फ्रीडम ऑफ नेविगेशन और फ्रीडम ऑफ सीज है. नाउ इन्हीं पे फोकस करते हुए he came up with the 14 principles, and the second principle is talking about freedom of speech, freedom of seas. That means if the water is outside your territorial area, it's a sea which is outside your territorial waters, then you should have the freedom over that also. Then only free trade can develop. Third, he talks about removal of all economic barriers. Removal of all economic barriers to trade. Removal of all economic barriers to trade. ठीक है? So the economic barriers to trade, that must be removed. Third is talking about with reference to armaments, that is reduction of national armament. Reduction of national armaments to lowest level necessary for domestic safety. मतलब he talks about reduction of national armaments. Every country, they should reduce their arms, and that too at the lowest level. वहां तक reduce कर दो जितना you have enough. You feel that this much is enough for my domestic security. That much you should reduce. So he's talking about reduction of national armaments to the lowest level necessary for domestic safety. Fifth, free, open-minded, and impartial adjustments. Free, open-minded, and impartial adjustments of colonial claims. देखो, every country, the First World War, we all know that it all started because every country wanted, every European power, they wanted to have more and more territory under their belt. So here Woodrow Wilson is talking about free, open-minded, and impartial adjustments. That means every colonial power, they had their claims. कि ये मेरा है, वो मेरा है. They had the claims like this. So Woodrow Wilson says that within the colonial powers, there must be a free, open-minded, and impartial adjustment. मतलब the adjustments must be impartial, it must be open-minded, and it must be free. मतलब तीनों चीजों का बारे में बात किया है. That means whosoever are the powers, that is the British, the French, the Portuguese, and all, they should sit together in an open-minded manner, in a free manner, and they should impartially adjust with regard to the colonial claims. Then he talks about Germany also, that the German troops, they should evacuate from Russia and respect Russian independence. ठीक है, German troops evacuation from Russia and also respect the for the Russian independence. ठीक है, सो अब तक 6 हो गए हैं. फर्स्ट ओपन कॉन्वेंट्स की बात हुई है. ओपन कॉन्वेंट्स, that is peace openly arrived at, no secret agreement. Then freedom with regard to sea outside territorial water. Then removal of economic barriers. Then reduction of national armament. ठीक है, free, open minded, impartial adjustment of colonial claims. Then German troops evacuation from Russia. That means the German troops, they should evacuate from Russia. And also the 7th one was the evacuation of German troops from Belgium. Seventh, evacuation of German troops from Belgium. Write it down. 8th is also with regard to the evacuation of German troops. Now it's from France. Evacuation of German troops from France. Especially this was the much contested region, Alsace-Lorraine. Now, Woodrow Wilson talks about the evacuation of German troops from France, including this region. ठीक है, then he talks about Italian borders. 9th, readjustment of Italian borders, Italian border along clearly recognized line of nationality. देखो यहां पे मेन फोकस क्या है? एनालिसिस ऑफ द स्टेट. हर चीज में देखो बॉर्डर और वही सब चीज बात हो रहा है. Then 10th point is limited self-government. Limited self-government for the people of Austria-Hungary ठीक है, Austria-Hungary was at that side, losing side. So he is talking about limited self-government for the people of Austria-Hungary. It's Hungary. ठीक है, this is the 10th point. Then again, 11th is evacuation of German troops. Evacuation of German troops from Balkans. बोला जाता है ना, जो सबसे important reason था for the outbreak of the First World War was these Balkans. ये Balkan was the bone of contention between all the major powers. Whether it was Germany, whether it was Russia, whether it was France, it was Italy, Austria, Hungary, or it was Britain, सबके बीच में यहीं पे लड़ाई हो रहा था, Balkans. Why? Because it was a rich area, मतलब mineral rich area, resource rich area. So everyone wanted to control that resource and all. ठीक है, और आज तुम देखो Balkans is a divided house. More than 16 countries have come out of it. जैसे बोस्निया, ठीक है, हर्ज़ेगोविना, स्लोवेकिया, स्लोवेनिया, ठीक है, यूगोस्लाविया एंड ऑल, ये सब जो है उसी में से आया है. तो इवैक्यूएशन ऑफ जर्मन ट्रूप्स फ्रॉम Balkans and independence of the Balkan people. Independence of the Balkan people. Then comes the 12th one. It's with regard to Turkey. Independence for Turkey and limited self-government for other nationalities. हमें पता है Turkey was also on the losing side. Remember that. Turkey, it was ruled by the Ottoman Turks. They were regarded as the caliphs. So Turkey was also on the losing side. So independence of Turkey and limited self-government for other nationalities. ठीक है, for other nationalities who were formally living under the Ottoman Empire. ठीक है. Then 13 is independence of Poland. Independence of Poland. Write it down. And लिख लिए. And what about the 14th principle? वो थोड़ा सा बड़ा है, इसीलिए I'll write it here. The 14th principle is the formation of general association. Formation of a general association. We all know that after the First World War, the League of Nations were formed. है ना? League of Nations formed हुआ था, but the League of Nations, it became मतलब it did not become a very good or powerful international organization. Its main purpose was to promote peace and all, but बोला जाता है those who were there involved in the war, they never became the member of that League of Nations. USA was not a member of that League of Nations. ठीक है? So formation of a general association of nations under specific convents, that is agreement, under specific convents for the purpose of affording and so these are the 14 principles जो वुडरो विल्सन ने दिया. ये फर्स्ट में 6 आई हैव रिटन हियर. ठीक है. देन ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट द evacuation of Germany, evacuation of German troops from Belgium, then evacuation of German troops from France, especially Alsace-Lorraine region, then readjustment with regard to Italian borders, okay, that is on the line of nationality, then limited self-government for the people of Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was also on the losing side. Evacuation of German troops from Balkans and independence to the Balkan people. Then he's talking about independence for Turkey and also limited self-government for nationalities which were under the Ottoman Empire. Then independence of Poland, and the last one, overall it's nothing else but it's talking about the formation of a general association of nations, that is League of Nations. General association of nations का formation करना है, और वो भी under which grounds? Under specific convents. ठीक है, it should be under specific convents. Let me correct the spelling of this convent. Under specific convents. For what? For mutual guarantee. That means this agreement, it will mutually guarantee everyone's political independence as well as territorial integrity. That means for the large and the small states, there will be equal guarantee with regard to political independence and territorial integrity. That means everyone, every nation who is a part of this agreement, they will respect each other's political independence as well as territorial integrity. That is what is there in this particular second strain. ठीक है. And the last, we'll be talking about the third strain. और ये जो third strain है, its focus is on nothing else but the structure of the system. Third strain, I said you, the focus is on what? The focus is on the structure of the system. The focus is on the structure of the system. ठीक है, structure of the system पे main focus है. और इसमें हम बोल सकते हैं मेन is Hobson. J.A. Hobson. (1858 to 1940). ठीक है, so the main proponent of this line of thought is J.A. Hobson, and we can say that this line of idealism did resemble the did resemble to structural realism ठीक है, where it assumes the anarchic nature of international system. ठीक है, yes, this third strain, it does resemble with the structural realism because they are talking about the structure of the system. So here there is a resemblance with regard to structural realism because structural realism talked about the anarchic nature of international system, and this strain here, Hobson is also talking about the structural, he is talking about the anarchic nature of the international system, but he also emphasizes the role of international organizations, and institutions in securing peace and cooperation. Okay, So this is with regard to the third strain. Now from here, what we'll do is that we'll talk about the types of idealism. That is, we will talk about the sociological, the democratic, ठीक है, 4 types है, वो 4 types को हम लोग next class में discuss करेंगे, ठीक है, and then that will come to an end. So this is what we have done, entire thing. हम लोगों ने विड्रो विल्सन के 14 principles भी बात किए. We talk about the 3 strains, that is the first strain, the second strain and the third strain. The first strain, the analysis is all about human nature. Second strain, the analysis is all about state. And the third state, the focus is about the structure of the system. So thank you all for joining with me today, and thank you all for being a part of this online course. So tomorrow we'll start up with the 4 types of idealist approach, or the 4 types of idealism, okay, with regard to international relations. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Take care.